All right. Well, welcome. I met you a few minutes ago, and I met you at the retreat. So, your name is? And have you been here before? Never. So, what brought you here today?
Having come out of fundamentalism, extremist sort of mindsets.
Oh, interesting.
Thrown into it at an early age. So,
Oh. And so, how did you hear about it? Oh, wow. Wow, great. That's exciting. All right, so let me just make sure I've got everything all set up. I'm trying to test a couple of different pieces of equipment here at the same time, since I'll be talking during that.
I'm sorry, what is your name again?
Bob?
Bob.
Arnold. Yeah, sorry, I guess I'm gonna get like really started in about one more minute, and then I'll make that all make sense.
And I'm Jack.
Hi, Jack. I'm Luz. I'm Jasmine.
Jasmine?
Luz.
Luz.
L-U-Z.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so slating for the recorders and the video. My name is Bob Arnold. Today is September 18th, 2013, and this is class 1 of a course called The Art of Interpretation. We're here at Wisdom's Heart Center on Cape Ann, Massachusetts, and yeah, so that takes care of that. So what we're going to do is we'll give you a little quick introduction overview. We'll get set our motivation. We'll do a short meditation, and then we'll talk about the course in general, put it in a framework of what it is. The schedule will be Wednesdays for 4 weeks. You can come to today, and if you don't like it, you don't have to come back. Or you can come back to all of them if you want, or if you're busy for one and you miss one, that's fine. It's not like a course we have to register and, you know, it's like, oh, you missed one, you can't come back. It's, you know, drop in to whatever you can. 7:30 to 9:30, this is the 18th, and it'll sort of go through the 9th, so it's for the next 4 Wednesdays. And the way that we'll do the class is I'll do most of the talking, and then periodically we'll stop and we'll see if people have questions. We'll maybe do a little discussion, that kind of stuff. When you teach a class like this is a spiritual class, however you want to think about it. My original training, we'll say, is in Buddhism, so it's generally speaking a Buddhist class. We'll be reading texts that come from a Buddhist lineage, and then there's, you can say, well, you know, which one of the lineages, and, you know, is it this school or that school? And we'll actually be talking about a few of those things in the course. We're not going to read the Bible because I'm not a Bible scholar, so it's just that's the reference for it. It doesn't mean that we're not going to necessarily quote other things if they're appropriate, but this particular class fits in a series, which I'll talk a little bit more, and it's one of the more advanced classes. It's a very difficult class, generally speaking. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to be able to have it be just fine and you walk in and go, oh, I didn't think it was that hard. You know, that's fine. It's not that it has to be hard or complicated. It's just the nature of where it fits in, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as it goes. So, yeah. So let's actually just start by thinking about why we came here. You know, it's a question, a thought question. So for yourself, think about what prompted you to come. You know, obviously, you had to have heard about it, but what went off in your head that said, "Oh, I'm going to go to that." You know, it's a Wednesday night. It's 2 hours. Maybe it's a long drive. Maybe it's a walk around the corner. But it's 2 hours. I don't have a TV, so I don't know what's on TV on Wednesday nights. But there's probably something that lots of people say is good. Ooh, Wednesday night, can't miss that. And I've had people say, oh, I can't do this or that, and I've offered them opportunities to do really interesting things, like, oh, hey, do you want to go here? Or I got tickets to the Celtics game, or loves basketball. Oh, well, I can't. There's a rerun of this, or I want to watch this program. Um, so we're always thinking about what we think is going to bring us happiness in the moment, and that's going to set our motivation as to why we would decide to come here. So in the Buddhists' theory of education, it's not a good thing to just come because you thought, well, I had nothing else to do. I just said, ah, the heck with it, I'll just go there. Just, it was on the way and I had to walk somewhere and I had 2 hours, so I thought it would be, a comfortable seat for 2 hours and I wouldn't really care. That's not a good motivation. On the other hand, there's also the idea that, well, whatever got you in the door. I have a friend who is has been studying for quite a long time and is a very advanced student, meaning he's studied for, it's kind of like he's in the PhD program, kind of. And what got him into it was he went to a yoga class because there was a cute chick that he wanted to hang out with. That was the only reason he went. And that's like, she was cute and she went to the yoga class, so I went. He wanted to get to talk to her more, and he'd only met her that day. So, that got him started, and he's happier. So you can't fault what gets you there. And so that's part of what this course is about, looking at, well, this particular spiritual teacher said this, and it was helpful to some people. But you could say, well, but it's not really true, like in the greater sense. Or it's not the highest level of teaching. So does that mean it's not true or it was a waste of time? And if someone said to him, oh, hey, come to this class because there's a really cute chick and you'll get to meet her, would that be a bad thing to say if it got him in the door and it in the long run made a difference? So that's part of the kinds of things that we're going to think about in this class. And again, it's focused more on Buddhism. So we'll be looking at things the Buddha said. When the Buddha said this or that, what did he mean? And what should we do with that? And there's some, very similar things. One of the ones we'll look at first is almost identical to one of the things Jesus said. Jesus was at the temple teaching, and they came in and said, hey, dude, your mom and brother are outside. And he says, I don't have a mother or a brother. You're my family. So what did that mean? Was he being literal? I don't have a mother? I don't have a brother? Like they died, they're not around anymore, or I didn't have one? Or was he being literal, or was it just an expression, a figurative way of speaking that meant you guys are more important, they're not on the same path as me, they're not going to help me help more people at this moment, or it's the kind of thing. And the Buddha said something very similar. He said, kill your mother and father. Now, did he mean go out and get an axe and chop them up, or get a gun and shoot them, or something like that? Or did he mean if you're trying to be happy and your path is to go to the monastery or study the spiritual scriptures, and they're getting in your way and saying, hey, what are you doing that for? Come watch TV, or we're going to go hang out at the beach and drink some beer. Why are you reading those books? You're wasting your time. Then they're getting in the way, and you should leave and kind of make a break. That's the kind of thing that we're looking at. Is it being figurative or is it being literal? And so it's interesting. You said, there are the fundamentalist groups. Different religions have very fundamentalist sects. And the fundamentalists are saying, I believe in the literal truth of the Bible or the Buddha or the Bhagavad Gita or whatever. Meaning it said that, and word for word, that's exactly what it meant. And that's kind of a simplistic and not very useful way of thinking about things. And it'll get you in trouble really quickly. Like the Buddha said, kill your mother and father. Well, I'm going out and get a gun and I'm going to do it. Is not going to be legally very good and spiritually very good. So you have to put a little more thought into it. And no matter which tradition you look at, you're going to find times when the teachings are figurative, to illustrate a point or mean something in a context, not by themselves. And you'll run into trouble going, well, there's two contradictory things. It can't be both. So you have to put your thinking caps on and use your head to kind of learn how to evaluate it. And that's a process of being a smart spiritual practitioner. And that's part of what this course is about. How do you develop that thinking cap? How do you decide what's going to be smart for you to do? And how do you interpret those kinds of things? What are some of the tools you can use to do that? That's part of it. Later on, in a couple of classes later, one of the main sets of teachings that the Buddha gave that come up in seemingly paradoxical ways is about one of the most important aspects of Buddhism, and it's called emptiness. The way the different, they call them schools of Buddhism, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. You could say philosophies or mindsets, where the Buddha said this, and then a little while later he said something contradictory. And then a little while later someone came along and said, hey, first you told us this, then you told us this, which one's correct? Or was it neither one of the two and it's a third option? And so then he gave a third option, and that's what they call the three turnings of the wheel. Meaning, there's a thing in Buddhism, a symbol called the wheel of Dharma. There's one hanging on the wall over there. And, it's an icon. It's an iconographic idea. And it means that the Buddha said some things, and it was in one particular context, and later he'd said something different. So that was a different turning of the wheel. And then later on, and we say that, and that's, again, an early example of when we're being figurative, not literal, because we can't look at it historically on the calendar and say, oh, for these 3 years he taught this information. And then these 4 years he taught a different thing, and then these 2 years he taught something else, and it's chronological. In the very beginning he said some of the things, and you could listen to one of the teachings and you can get all three turnings of the wheel depending on how you understand it. So that's just a loose analogy, but if you put on different glasses, you're going to see it differently. So your understanding is going to be different, you'll interpret it differently. And so that's another aspect of the three turnings of the wheel, is that they're not in a complete linear sense, and later on he would say some of the things depending on the audience. So that's one of the things about when you teach a class like this, is we don't know who's going to show up. So we can have an outline and say, this is what I'm going to do, and then a different group of people shows up. And you go, oh, well, that outline really isn't going to be helpful. They'll just sit there and go, huh? This is in a series of courses, number 15. It's based on that, so we'll see what happens. I mean, we can call it something, and I'll give you a little bit more about that in a few minutes, or we could just call it something else. And I called it something else to start with, so we actually don't have to follow any syllabus, and no one's going to come and slap me on the wrist and say, hey, you didn't follow the syllabus, because it's my class, I made it up. I decided to roughly base it on one set of teachings that have already been done, and we'll see what happens. And again, it depends on who shows up. If 10 people showed up that have taken all 14 classes prior to it, they'd be like, oh, great, let's jump right in the deep end and keep moving on. But if we don't have the preparation for that, then it doesn't really do a lot of good. And I'm happy to just throw the outline out and do whatever works. I mean, not completely. I mean, it's all within a context. I'm not going to make something up. It's all going to be based on stuff that we'll teach here one day or another. So it should all be good stuff, hopefully. Be hopeful. So let's actually just take a moment and close our eyes and just settle into your seat to be comfortable. And just quietly watch your breath. See if you can do it without really moving around much for just a minute or two. And just think about what brought you here. And then just think about the idea that there's a possibility that somebody, somewhere along the line in the past, figured some stuff out that helped them be really happy, like permanently happy. And they taught some people about those things that helped them. And those people were helped and said, hey, this stuff works. And then they taught some more people. And it got passed on from one person to the next. And throughout the last 2,500 years, there have been people who have been repeating the things that they heard from their teachers. And people have been benefited by it and have felt better. And along the spectrum, some people thought, oh, that's useful. And other people thought, well, you know, that's okay. And other people were just blown away by it. And we'll fit into that category somewhere. We'll hear some things, and we'll try to figure out where to put that. Is this useful? Can I apply it? Does it make sense? And think about the idea that there was a person, a human, just a regular guy, who had some realizations in his life that, wow, this is pretty scary, what's going on. You know? People are getting sick, they're getting old, they're dying, and there's nothing we can do about it. Or is there? And he decided to sit until he figured something out. And we call him the Buddha, or Shakyamuni Buddha, or Buddha. And those teachings have been passed on for 2,500 years. And somebody, more than one person, a number of people have gotten those teachings along the way and passed them on to me. And now you're going to get to hear some of them. And just think of how many links in that chain all the way back to the Buddha there are. And just think, wow, that's, you know, if this is useful to me, then that's pretty cool. Worst case, you'll have wasted 2 hours. Best case is, wow, you know, you'll have some really good tools. And you'll be able to end your suffering. So our job in this class will be to put on our thinking caps and evaluate the information. And we'll find that it falls in 2 categories. Things that make sense and things that don't. And it's what we do with those things that will really matter. If it makes sense and we apply it, then that's really useful. And if it doesn't make sense, what we want to be careful of is to not throw it away, to trash it and say, well, that's just crap. But just go, I don't understand that. It's worked for some people, I don't get it. I'll just file it away in a corner of the library in my mind that says, yeah, you know, I don't know if I'll ever read this book again, but I'll hang on to it just in case, rather than throwing it away. And try to listen in your own mind to the conversations that pop up as you hear the different things that we go through today. And every time you notice that you're thrown to a particular judgment, oh, wow, that's good, oh, that's bad, or I don't understand that, or I'll never understand that, or wow, that makes a lot of sense. Any of those, just notice them. And every time you're able to notice that, think, wow, that's pretty cool. I'm just able to watch my own mind. That's an advancement over 99% of the population on the planet. Most people aren't here tonight. Most people will never have access to this kind of information. But again, for yourself, you have to evaluate, is it useful? And if it is, then that's pretty cool. So just take a moment to be happy. Try to just bring yourself to the room and generate a sense of, wow, that's pretty cool. Even if it's just a guy going blah, blah, blah at the front, maybe I'll pretend that it's useful and it's fun. And I'm pretty special because most people aren't here. And so that would make me special to have access to this kind of information. So open your eyes and anybody have any questions so far? Okay. So the first part of the class that we're going to go through is thinking about why we would even come to a class like this. Ultimately, you could boil down the purpose of any spiritual, we'll call it spiritual as opposed to secular. Secular is just, shopping, kind of stuff. Science, saying that, well, that's a whole other story. We won't get into it just yet. But we could go on and have a whole class about what's the difference between science and religion, and what's the difference between religion and spirituality. So there's a lot of things that we can't take a little side trip on and talk a lot about because we'll never get through the class. So there are some things that they'll just fly right by and go, oh wow, I don't even know what that means. And we'll just have to recognize that, because this isn't a beginner's step 1 course, but it's open to beginners. So you just kind of have to take what you get. If you can grab onto it and use it, great. And if not, then in Buddhism we'd say it's just planting seeds that will ripen later, and they'll become something that you'll understand more later. So for me, I like to use an analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. Everybody here's probably had a jigsaw puzzle at one point. So let's say you got this big 5,000 piece puzzle, and you don't have even a box to look at. You just have parts, and you don't even know what a puzzle is. And someone says, oh, we've got a project for you. This will make you happy if you put this together. What does that mean? Well, there's all these little parts, and you got to put them together. Well, how do I do that? So you get an instruction. And someone says, well, see how this one has a smooth edge? Find everything that has a smooth edge and put it in a pile. And so you just take that instruction, and everything that doesn't have a smooth edge, you just throw it away. And then you take all the smooth edges and you go, okay, I got it. Now what? And they say, well, now you see how they interlock. You find the ones that fit together. And then you get a big frame. And then you say, okay, I'm done. Now what? And you say, well, now you take the other pieces, and you go, well, I don't have any other pieces. I threw them all away. That's kind of what it's like if you hear something that doesn't make sense, that you just say, well, that's bullshit. It plants a seed in your mind that's very similar to taking that piece of the puzzle and throwing it away. Later on, when it comes time to be useful, you now understand what a jigsaw puzzle is, and you now get in some practice at it, and you now say, okay, now I'll start looking for other pieces, but you don't have them because you've thrown them away. And so that's a lot like what happens when you, well, just say trash talk, an idea that comes out of a spiritual practice. It could be, any spiritual practice. It doesn't really matter. It's the idea that somebody thinks that's holy and is useful, sacred, it can help them end their suffering, and you've said it's bullshit, so it's not going to be able to help you. It's a very difficult seed to overcome when you plant that kind of a thought in your mind. So it's best to just take anything that you don't understand and go, well, I just don't understand. I'll just put it off to the side. I'll just stick it on the shelf. That's like taking all the puzzle pieces that you don't need and just putting them over there. Then later on, you can go look and go, oh, now that makes sense. I see what that's for, and you can use it. But you have to have a sense that there's something useful to those pieces. There was a reason they were in the box that they gave me. Otherwise, you're throwing them away, and you go, well, I'm never going to use it, so I'm going to throw it away. This isn't trash. And until we know the things that we don't know right now, we can't actually know that the things we don't know are useful. So that's kind of a little bit of a problem if we are not careful. Okay. So that's just a little word of advice there. And so now let's drill in a little bit more to this specific course. This course is called The Art of Interpretation, which is one way of translating what was a text that was actually in Tibetan, because Buddhism got brought to Tibet, and because it's so isolated, the people there weren't involved in a lot of wars, nobody bothered them, so it just stayed there and got preserved. It's kind of like being put in a time capsule in one sense. And then when China came and bothered them and kicked them out, it basically opened up the time capsule and made, so you could say, well, is China invading Tibet a bad thing or a good thing? Well, it made it available to me, so that's a good thing for me, at one level. Now, there were monasteries that were burned, over 5,000, books that were destroyed, and there are no copies anymore. So that's not a good thing. So it's not one thing or the other, it's many things. But the idea that Buddhism has now spread, for me, is a good thing because I think it's useful. Okay? I'm not here to tell you that it's the only one that you should follow, the only spiritual path. I'm not here to tell you that the other ones are wrong. Ultimately, you'll find that all of the paths that are authentic traditions that have been around for a long time are all teaching basically the same thing. Different words, but all ultimately the same thing. And as some people will say, we all, meaning the spiritual teachers, the monks, the nuns, those kind of guys, they all work for the same company. They're just like cereal. There's just different flavors and colored boxes, but there's, sugary cereal, healthy cereal, hot cereal. There's like 3 or 4 kinds of cereal. And everything else is just packaging. And so in some ways it's like that. Okay. And so one of my teachers is a monk. He was born in Arizona, so he's a Western, an American. And he went and studied in a Tibetan monastery. And then he took all of the information that he learned, and rather than tell his students, okay, here, memorize this book for a year, and then when you've got it memorized, we'll start to study it. And he didn't teach 7-year-olds to 14-year-olds in a monastery and then say, okay, now we're going to teach you, more information. He brought it into the West in a way that we're familiar with. A course starts and ends, has homeworks and quizzes and a final exam, and then you go to the next course. And it has a textbook, and you read it, and that's the white notebooks that are on the shelves back there. And those are called the Asian Classics Institute formal courses. And there's 15 of them. And then they had 3 review courses. And then one of my teachers was asked to take those courses, which are 10 classes each, and boil them down to just 4. And then, so you can see that could be like, oh, well, if there's a lot of fluff, you just cut the fluff out. But if it's already, boiling down 20 years of a monastery education to 10 classes, cutting it down to 4 is even harder. But there's no homeworks, no quizzes, and that's what this course is based on. So there's the formal courses and then what we call the Dharma essential courses. We're going to start calling them foundational courses, just to be different. And then in the series, when one of my teachers, Geshe Michael, the person who took them from the monastery and retaught them and repackaged them, when he taught them, this was number 15. So this was the last in the series. So it's a little bit harder than most of the others. Not harder in the sense that the information is more technical, like 2 classes earlier would have been 13, which was logic. That one is very complicated because it's very, very specific. This one's a little bit harder, mostly because we have to really just look at our own thought process. And we have to look at how we think about things. So it's just a little bit more potentially different than the way we think about things. Or it could be like, oh, wow, this just makes total sense. This is what I've been waiting for all my life. It could go either way. So we don't want to pigeonhole it and go, oh, it's hard. It doesn't have to be hard. But he said it could be hard, and there were many people who said it's hard. And most people say it is hard, but that doesn't mean it is. That's just generally what it's like. So that puts this course in that perspective. So I don't know. Any questions about that? Okay. There's a PDF document I can send you if you want. Or if you don't have email, we can print a copy. We might have a couple. We should have a few here, but if not, we can email it to you, and you can have the readings if you want. And so from the reading, there's a text. This is a sutra, which means it's something that the Buddha spoke. And then it wasn't recorded with an audio recorder, and it wasn't recorded by a transcriptionist. People didn't do that. People had really much more power of memory 2,500 years ago. There were people that would study, and they could hear a teaching and repeat it word for word. And then, you get a few words missing here and there, and then people would gather afterwards and review it and go, oh yeah, then he said this and they said that, and then they would pass it on and reteach it, and it would be the way the information was passed on. And then eventually people started writing it down. And that happened primarily in India, and as I said earlier, it went to Tibet. And because they were so isolated, they wrote enormous amounts of texts, and most of them were preserved until the Chinese started burning them. But there's a series of books called the Kangyur and the Tengyur, which are the textbooks of a monastery. And Geshe Michael started a project just over 25 years ago to go around the world and find libraries and collections that had these books. And they were all hand printed with ink blocks. So there's actually one up on the top of the bookshelf there. You can see it. That's one page. It's that piece of wood that's on the very top up there. And you can look at it on the one on the left there. This is block. And they would ink the block, and then they would put a piece of paper down and print it. And that's how they would print one page. And so printing a book, it's a stack of sheets of paper. And that gets wrapped in a cloth, and those are preserved. So they find these, and then they can't just, scan them with a computer and have an OCR program read it. So they have to have somebody type them in by hand. And they spent 25 years paying the refugees from Tibet, raising money to pay the refugees to do that. And they have all of the Kangyur and the Tengyur in an electronic format. Now, I can't read it. When I got a copy of it electronically, someone gave it to me when they had a big anniversary celebration for 25 years and they finished it. I got a copy of it. I started scrolling through it on the computer and looking at it, but it's just squiggly lines to me. I can't read it because I can't read Tibetan script. But there were a few words that I knew, and they've transliterated it into characters that my keyboard can type, and I searched for words, and I just had fun. I couldn't read 99.9% of it, but I had fun scrolling through and going, oh, look, there's a word that I know. And then it shows up 100 times, in 3,000 documents that I have. So that's a pretty big project. So that's preserved the information. And then he translated it in English. And that's the texts that we have in those binders. And then, again, boiled down into a smaller format, shorter format. And so this is from that reading. So I just want to give you a taste of how all this information came to be here. I didn't make it up. Someone taught me, and they got it from somebody who got it from somebody on back. So a sutra means something that the Buddha spoke, and then eventually somebody wrote it down, and we have access to it, and someone translated it into English. And he said, different beings must wander here because they have no knowledge of the way of emptiness, of peace and things that never began. Those with compassion use skillful means and millions of different reasonings to bring them into it. So that kind of sets the tone for this course. There's a set of teachings in Buddhism called teachings about emptiness, or a larger umbrella called wisdom. So in Buddhism, you could define it as two kinds of teachings, wisdom and compassion. And a lot of people like compassion. It's pretty easy. Oh, be nice to people. Help people out. Don't yell at them. Don't get angry. Be patient. And those are useful. But they only get you so far. So you could hear a teaching on, oh, when someone yells at you at work tomorrow, don't yell back. You say, okay, I'll do that. That guy was nice. I'll try it. And then maybe you persevere through the first person, being annoying to you. And then the second person, you're like, well, this is a little bit hard. Then the third person, you're like, all right, that's enough. I'm being walked all over. And you don't understand why not to yell at people. You don't have the wisdom behind it. It's going to lose any traction for you pretty quickly. So in Buddhism, we say there are two wings. Just like a bird, you have to have two wings. One of them is compassion, and the other one is wisdom. And so this is from the series of teachings about wisdom and an understanding of emptiness. And we'll talk a little bit more about it in a bit. I call it like the Holy Grail. We're all familiar with the concept of the Holy Grail. Everybody was searching for it. It was going to be something special when they found it. Then there's different schools of that. Well, the Holy Grail was a set of teachings. No, it was an actual cup. No, it was, I'm not a Holy Grail scholar, but, you watch Monty Python or, some other movie and you go, okay, the Holy Grail, it's kind of a cool thing, whatever it is. So it's something people search for. And an understanding of what sometimes you'll hear it called ultimate reality, how things really work, And right away we think, well, I know how things work. I mean, it's pretty simple. I got a body, I got arms, legs, there's a cup there, and I know the tea is cooling. That's why I took the lid off, because I know how things work. It was still hot. I put too much boiling water in, I drink it, it will burn my mouth. Oh yeah, that's how things work. That's a very superficial understanding. When you start to go deeper and deeper into that, we see that's actually not how things work. There's a lot more detail to it. And all the great traditions have that same concept. There's something that we don't know, that if we knew it, it would transform us in a big way. And so that's the question. It's like, why would I want to do that? What's the transformation that will happen? And you can think about it from a number of spiritual perspectives, and we'll throw out a bunch of words. You can call it heaven, you can call it liberation, Sanskrit, you could call it mukta, freedom, nirvana. Just think about anything that bothers you. Like anything, even the smallest little thing. What if nothing bothered you? Like you were just permanently happy all the time. You're like, wow, that would be really cool. And then immediately go, yeah, but that's not possible. And, then we start to roll back and go, yeah, I don't think so. But it would be kind of nice. Well, it's kind of silly. It's a fairy tale. And that's very common that we roll it back and let go of that as a real dream. But if you think about it, what does it mean to be in heaven? What would heaven be like? And then you hear stories where they say the streets are paved with gold and there's pearly gates. Or in the Buddhist tradition, they say the streets are paved with, they don't use gold, they use something called lapis lazuli. It's a type of gem, and it's bluish, green, turquoise, or something like that. But then it's really hard because it's a stone. So they say, well, but it's very soft and squishy. So your feet are comfortable and it doesn't bother your feet. And you go, is that really the truth? That's silly. Let's go back to Krishna. Well, I'm going to be on a cloud and there'll be a harp and, life will be good. We have sort of cartoony kind of versions of these things and we don't really put a lot of thought into it. Like, what would that mean? Wouldn't it be kind of boring to just sit on a cloud and play a harp all day? Is that really what it means? So is that a literal teaching? Like, I'm going to die and I'm going to go to a cloud and play a harp. Or does it mean it'll be a place, or maybe it won't even be a different place? There's another, like, is it going to be different? In Christianity, they say the kingdom of heaven is within. It's imminent. It's right here. You don't have to go somewhere. In Buddhism, we say, well, modern Buddhism, we say it's not an exit off the freeway. Nirvana is the permanent end of your mental afflictions. A mental affliction is something that bothers you. I get pissed off, I'm angry, I'm unhappy, I'm jealous, I want this, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, I got an itch, anything. That's a mental affliction. It disturbs my peace of mind. I'm not happy. And the goal is to be permanently happy. That's a higher goal. A real basic goal is to just not be quite so unhappy. Even that's a useful goal. You take it in steps. Well, if life didn't suck and it was okay, that would be good. And then you get to that point and you go, well, life's pretty good, but what if it could be like awesome? And then think about whatever your vision of that is. If it's from Buddhism, you go, well, I'm going to be a Buddha and I'll live in a Buddha paradise, or I'll be Christian and I'll think of a cloud and I'll be in heaven, or I don't know, whatever you think it's going to be like. And then you think, well, but I couldn't do that. That's what most of us have happen at some point. There's some part in the back of my mind going, yeah, it's not possible. It's too far away. And then ask yourself, what is your life like right now? You all got here. So you're in a building that's not being bombed, and we're talking about religion, spiritual practice, and we're not worried, we didn't post a guard at the door to suddenly turn out the lights and pretend we're cooking or something. We're not afraid that the police are going to come and tell us we can't do this. And you go, well, yeah, but doesn't that describe like everybody? But then you start to think about it. There's most people who won't have that opportunity. Then you put yourself in the position of somebody living on the streets of Calcutta in a cardboard box, on the median strip of a street, or in Mexico City, or Mumbai or someplace. And imagine what your life looks like to them. And if someone took a video of you for 24 hours and they brought this little magic machine, and they go, oh my God, there's like a person in there and what that's like, and they're looking at you on that screen, they would think, oh my God, that's like a God. Like, I could never have that happen. That's amazing. The distance between their life, in their mind, in your life, is massive. And it's probably greater than the distance between your life and the life of a person who, in Buddhism, we could call, a person who's reached freedom, liberation. They have no more mental afflictions, who's ended their suffering. We're actually closer to that than they are to us, probably. But on the other hand, we're also not very far from them. It's a spectrum. So, in Buddhism, we talk about all beings. And so ask yourself about a fish or a turtle, or a dog even, or a coyote that lives in the woods around here. They're even further away. So, you've got to put it on a spectrum and see if you're limiting yourself already about the stuff we're talking about. So that's part of our goal, is to have some understanding of this thing, this information, this concept, this experience that will transform us in a way that we would just be permanently happy. Like that's what we're putting out there. That's what we're offering. That's what's on the table. It's like, wow, Then you got to ask yourself, does that sound possible? Even remotely possible? And what would I do to get it? Like, would I come and sit in a lecture for 2 hours and listen and, come for an hour and a half on Saturday mornings to debate and like chew it apart and discuss it with people, or read a book about it at home? Or would I just go home and go, oh yeah, that's right, Patriots are playing today. Oh, I'm going to watch that. Or would we just limit ourselves and say, no, that's not possible. I couldn't do that. They say there's the Sanskrit word is klesha. It's something that disturbs your peace of mind. It disturbs you. It's from the Sanskrit word klish. And the English translation will say mental affliction. They say in Buddhism there's 84,000 of them, which in the Tibetan language sometimes they'll say 9 or 100 or 1,000. Those numbers all mean like a gajillion. Depends. So you have to know the context. So, there's 100 of this. Really, there's 100? No, there's like a gajillion. That's just what we called it. So when they say there's 84,000 different mental afflictions, they just mean you can't even count them. There's the mental affliction that it's just a little too hot or the chair's too hot. Those are all different ones. But of those 84,000, there's 26, I think, 24 like major ones that are really common to everybody. And then they boiled those down to 5 or 6, and then they boiled those down to 3. So the 3 root ones are wanting something in a bad way. So it's ignorant desire. It's not wanting things that's bad. So we don't get confused and think I have to not want things. Because if your life isn't perfect, you might say, well, I want to not suffer. Well, you want something. Oh, you want something. You have to give up your desire. I have to give up my desire to not be unhappy? No, of course, that's what's motivating you. Is you have to have a motivation. It's like, I want to not suffer. But I don't want to be a knucklehead and think, oh, I'm going to go out and steal that motorcycle and sell it so I can get money so I can go to this class that's in India. That would be a stupid way to do it. That would be taking somebody else's thing and stealing it. That would be not a good idea. So it's an understanding that it's the way we think we can go about doing those things. Wanting something and thinking, oh, if only I had the newest iPhone, then I would be happy because my phone is cracked and it's clunky. And that thing would bring me the happiness. Having the phone would be good or bad. It could be either way. I don't know. It depends on the circumstance. But if I got it, it's not going to permanently last forever. I guess that's redundant. It's not going to last forever. It's going to break at some point, and I don't want to forget that. But while I have it, it might be useful, and it's not going to be the one thing that's going to tip me over and make me permanently happy. So I'm not going to stupidly think of the things that I want. And I'm also not going to push away the things that I don't like. For example, that guy that comes to work who's annoying to me. if I got him fired, then I'd be happy. That would not be a wise thing. So that's a dislike of things, but it's a dislike of things that's really stupid. It's rooted in ignorance and the misunderstanding of why he's bothering me in the beginning. When he comes in and he says things about me or he pushes my buttons. And where did he come from? Well, he's just out there, and that's not really what the case is. That's just what I think. So ignorant wanting and ignorant disliking are two of the root mental afflictions. And the third one is just plain ignorance. Those are the three. And so in every Buddhist temple, there's something called the Wheel of Life. There's a painting that the Buddha taught how to paint it, how to draw it. And so we have one, and there's slight variations of them, but in the center of it is three animals. And you'll see them either chasing the tails of the others, or you'll see a pig, which represents ignorance, and out of the mouth of the pig comes a snake and a pigeon or a rooster or some kind of bird, depending on who's painted it. And those represent ignorant desire and ignorant disliking. And they both come out of the mouth of ignorance in the correct version. There's other versions, which are slightly wrong, but still useful. At least according to the teaching I got, because the Buddha taught it and said, draw the pig and draw the other two coming out of its mouth. So that's like the ultimate root of even the other two. So those are the three. And the reason I mention that is because doubt is one of the top 6. We'll doubt, oh, that wouldn't work. That's not the right teacher for me. That's not the right spiritual path for me. Or, wow, that guy's an amazing teacher. That's amazing teachings, but I could never do that. I mean, however you want to apply it, that's what most people are doing to some degree. And so we have to get past that and think. With doubt, in this course, the reason I mention that is this course is a lot about questioning things. Because if we were to just simply go, well, here's the sutra, this is what the Buddha said, now go forth and do it, we'd be actually not doing what he asked us to do. Because in one of the sutras he says, whatever I say, I don't want you to just believe it, because I said it. And, 2,500 years from now, when a guy sits up in the front of the room and says, well, here's what the Buddha said, don't just listen to him and do it because he said that's what I said. That's our more modern version. I'm going to tell you this is what the Buddha said, but don't just go and do it because I said he said it. And those are his instructions. He says, test it like gold. And in the old days, when you got a piece of gold, it didn't come from the U.S. Mint. You had that was the currency, and you would check it. You would do 3 things. You would test it, you would melt it, you'd burn it by fire, and see if it was real gold. See if it acted like gold. Okay, that's test number 1. Test number 2 is to cut it. So here, I'm going to give you a piece of gold, and you cut it and go, oh, look, it's filled with lead in the middle. You were trying to trick me. So we want to cut into it and see if it's the real deal. And then the third test is what they call a touchstone. So you take the gold and you file it and rub it on a touchstone to see if it matches other times this is gold, I know it's gold. I mined it, found it, or I got it from a trustworthy source, and this is how it reacts. Now I know how to test the next piece I get. And he says, do the same thing with the teachings. That's what I want you to do. And so that's part of what we're going to talk about in more detail in this course. Okay, is how to apply those to the teachings, not just to the Buddha, but anything anybody said. So when Jesus said, I have no mother, I have no brother, was he like a little confused? He just woke up and he was in a daze? Or was he lying? He's just this untruthful jerk and he just lied about stuff all the time? Or was it true? He didn't have a mother and a brother. Or did he mean something else by it? How do we evaluate those things? What did he really mean? What was he trying to tell us by that? Okay, so we'll do this classic teaching here that is in our tradition now. It's called the pen and the chew toy. So, does everybody know what this is? It's a pen, right? It's pretty straightforward. Now, if there was a puppy, and this actually happened. I was taking care of our friend's kittens, so it could be a dog or a kitten, and I wanted to write a note. I thought of something. I was sitting in the room playing with the kitten, and he was running around, and I took out my pen and he started chewing it. And immediately I thought, oh wow, really, it does happen. It's not just something somebody made up, like, well, imagine if a dog chewed it. I mean, dogs and kittens will chew it. To them, what does it look like? It's just a stick. It's a cylinder. It's something they can play with. So you got to ask yourself, we say it's a pen. The dog says that's something to chew. Who's right? You got to think about that one. Is it possible that from our perspective, because I can use it and I can make marks on a piece of paper, so that's the definition of a pen, it works, so for me it's a pen, so I'm right. But if the dog is chewing it and the dog is having fun with it, then the dog is right, wouldn't you say? So here's another question. Let's put the thing on the table and all of us humans will leave and all of the dogs and kittens will leave. So there's nobody in the room. Now what is it? You got to think about that one a little bit. It's like, So, and then the more you think about it, the more it becomes, oh, it's obvious. Oh, wait, no, it's not. And you play with that and you wrestle with it. And that's a meditation that you can do. It would be actually a good practice to just get up 5 minutes early every day and just pick up a pen on your nightstand and look at it, close your eyes and go, okay, I say it's a pen. Where does that come from? It's neither a pen or a chew toy if all the people leave the room and all the dogs leave the room, right? So if I'm looking at it, I see a pen. And I'm assuming you guys see a pen. You all said you knew what a pen was. And, this is modern society. We're not walking through the jungle somewhere going, oh, hey, dude, check this out. And he looks at it and goes, oh, I can use that to, open up a clamshell or something, or, use it for some other function. We see it as a pen. But if the dog sees it as a chew toy, the question now is, does the pen that we see come from the pen towards me and I see it, or does it come from me out here to this object, this stick, this cylinder, this plastic thing in this case? Which direction is it coming from? Does it come this way or this way? You're going to think. It's like, Because if it were coming this way, what would happen when I showed it to the dog? The dog would see a pen, right? It would have to see a pen if it was coming from the pen. But if it's coming from me, I see a pen. If it's coming from the dog sees a chew toy. Okay? You go, And then you got to think about that. You wrestle with it. At one level, that's like, oh, duh, that's easy. It could be two things. It could be one thing. It could be many things. But then you wrestle with that some more. And then you have to ask yourself, why do I see a pen? And why does the dog see a chew toy? That's the next question that you're probably wondering. So if I see a pen, we would say that it's because there was a seed. No, it's just a metaphor. It's an analogy from agriculture. A seed ripened. So a seed was planted, and then it ripened, and I saw a pen. So from me, the projection, we say, it projected onto this cylinder a pen. The nature of pen, the concept of pen came from me. The dog has a seed that ripens, and this is what we call karma. So the dog has a seed that ripens, and the dog sees chew toy. Now, here's another little technical piece. It's not that there's a dog, and because he's a dog, he sees a chew toy. And because I'm a human, I see a pen. It's the other way around. Someday, you will look down and you will see this, and you will see a chew toy. That's what makes you a dog. Now there's a video, you can Google it on TED Talks. Have you guys ever heard of TED Talks? I don't know exactly how it is. There's I don't know what it is. It's just called TED Talks, and you can Google it. But if you go to YouTube and Google a stroke of genius, or you can Google the singing scientist. It'll bring you to the same place somehow. And there's a woman, and I don't know all the details. I should know more about it. I've seen it a number of times. It's a woman who was a scientist, or still is a scientist, and she studies the brain. She studies people that have strokes and how the brain works. And the TED Talk, they go around, people submit stories and say, oh, this is a really interesting person. You should have her on your TED Talk. And then they get up and there's a big auditorium and they film it and then people can watch it. And that's a TED Talk. So, someone said you should have this person on as a TED Talk so she can get up and tell her story. So for, 10, 20 minutes, she's telling the story about how she was a scientist, she studied the brain, and one day she woke up and it turns out she had had a stroke. And so she got an inside view of what she was used to studying. And she tells the story of how, I got out of bed and something just didn't seem right. And I went over to the treadmill and I got on and I was kind of having trouble. And I looked down at the bars and I saw a claw. And it was probably like the third time I heard the talk that part I actually heard. And I thought, oh my God, how many times have we heard this thing about the pen and the chew toy? And you look down and you'll see a paw someday, and that's how you know you're a dog. It's not that you die and you get injected into a dog's body at the factory somewhere. It's a shift in your perception. A different karmic seed ripens, and you see a chew toy or you see a claw. And there's a live example of a person describing that literally happening to them, right? It's a very beautiful talk. It's amazing. And then she ended up recovering and different things happened, and but the struggle of her just trying to dial the phone to tell her coworker, I'm not going to be in today because I don't feel well. And all the perception's different. She said, I was having trouble reading the business card and losing my place. And so she tells how she worked it. It took her 45 minutes to call work. Finally, and she said, then, I don't know what the guy's name was, answered the phone. And I said, hey, I'm not feeling good. I'm not going to be into work today. And then this is her telling the story much later. She said, but what he heard, now this is her perception. She said, I'm not feeling well. I'm not going to be in work today. Or something like that. I'm just paraphrasing. The other person, as she describes, heard, see? Pen and chew toy. It's the same teaching. It's just a bunch of sound. And she hears, I'm not feeling well. I'm not going to be in work today. The other guy hears, and then, 20 minutes goes by or something, and they figure out, oh, you're having I figured out who you are. Let me call an ambulance, and on the story goes. That's the shift in perceptions that we're talking about. Those things happen moment by moment. Those karmic seeds that are ripening in our minds are happening 65 in a finger snap. It's not like one karmic seed ripened and I was born and my whole life lived and then that one seed died. These seeds happen, they're constantly changing. New ones grow. And if anybody here ever gardened? What happens when you put a seed in the ground and then you get a tomato plant? The seed's gone. That's it. Now you have a tomato plant, you have something else. And then later you have fertilizer, compost. Or compost and then fertilizer. And then you have something else. And it keeps changing. That's on a very gross scale. On a scale that fast, just the karmic seeds. Every time you take a breath, a karmic seed is ripening and being destroyed. And what happens when you run out of those karmic seeds? You stop taking a breath. As a human being, you're not a human anymore. You look down, you see a claw. And usually, you don't hear firsthand reports of that because it usually doesn't happen just like for a couple of seconds and then back to something else. That's some pretty interesting karmic ripenings there. Okay. So that's the concept of what we're talking about when we talk about the qualities of something. So this cylinder is a pen or is a chew toy? You say, well, it's neither one. The quality is coming from the person that's looking at it, right? So, does this cylinder have the nature of being a pen? No, right? We're all in agreement on that? Because we decided it's coming from me, so it's not in the pen. So, one long way of saying it is, this cylinder does not have the quality of being a pen. From its own side, the quality of its penness comes from me. That's a lot of words. So we can boil that down and say, well, it's empty of being a pen. So that's where we get the term in Buddhism, emptiness. It's empty of having a self-nature. That's another way of saying it. The self-nature of what we tend to think is, well, it's a pen. That's what it is. It's a pen. But the dog doesn't think that. And then when we put our thinking caps on, we go, wait, I think that, the dog thinks something else. Huh. So it can't be coming from the thing. The thing is devoid of having that self-nature. So those are just other terms, other ways of saying it. It's empty, meaning it's empty of being a pen from its own side. I bring the pen nature to the cylinder and turn the cylinder into a pen by my thinking that there's a dependent relationship between me and the cylinder to turn it into a pen. The dog, the dependent relationship is the dog and the cylinder, and they see a chew toy. Okay? Because if it was a pen, what would the dog do with it? It'd write with it. Yeah, it would pick it up and it would write a note to its doggy girlfriend saying you have a really cute tail, and it doesn't do that. So we know that it's not a pen for the dog. Okay? And we look around in the world. Once you have a little bit of this is what we call wisdom. This is the Holy Grail, the understanding of that. So at one level you go, well, that's easy. It could be a pen, it could be a chew toy. Okay, I get it. The more you understand that, the deeper you understand that, intellectually, the more it will change the way you see the rest of the world. That's how you begin to change your world. You can't go out there and manipulate the pen and turn it into a chew toy. You change your mind. So the angry boss, the irritating customer, they're the same. They go home and their spouse sees their darling. But you see an asshole came into the store and bothered you. Or, came to the meeting at work and disrupted my presentation. So they're not inherently a jerk. They're empty of being a jerk. Where's the jerk coming from? Coming from me. So that you see, everything is coming from you. Say, interesting. So that's one way of viewing emptiness. That's just in a nutshell, because we're going to start to roll our sleeves up and look at different ways of thinking about emptiness in this course. That's part of what the Buddha said in the turnings of the wheel. So that's why we're going to talk about that. So this is sort of groundwork to be able to actually do this class. This is, a little bit of essential information. That's why when they first named this series, of course, they called it Dharma Essentials. So you're going to get some essential stuff about Dharma. Dharma is a Sanskrit word, although it's becoming more of an English word. We're used to it. We've had the TV show Dharma and Greg. It's a Sanskrit word that means many, many, many things, like most Sanskrit words. Makes translating Sanskrit a little bit difficult. So you have to actually understand the material. So if you get an academic translation of a Buddhist text, frequently it doesn't mean anything. It's kind of dead because they don't understand. Nobody taught them what it should mean, and they just translated the word literally. Oh, well, that means this. But in this case, that doesn't make any sense. So we get examples of, is it figurative or literal? What does it really mean? All the time, especially if you read an academic translation, somebody who just can read and translate Sanskrit, but has no clue what it means. You get this a lot in the Yoga Sutra. A real common thing. People translate some of the verses of the Yoga Sutra and you go, well, okay, yeah, you could translate it. That word does mean that. But that's kind of stupid because it's useless information. It doesn't help you. It doesn't really mean anything useful. And so that's what we're trying to get at. How do we find the tools to figure out, was that really useful? Is that what really was meant by that verse? Okay. So now you're probably asking yourself, well, okay, you mentioned this word karma. there's something called karma, but I don't believe in it, or I'm not sure if I believe in it, but I'm not going to throw it out with the trash. I'm just going to go, well, I'll try it on. So we're going to poke at that one a little bit more. We're going to say, what are our options? What other options do we have? And we'll put them in perspective. And again, this is from the essential overview part of this class to just kind of give you some groundwork. Because we're going to have to come back to things that we have as common ground in this course often. And if we don't have some common ground, it's going to be very difficult to dig into the material any deeper. Okay? So there are 3, and only 3, what we'll call worldviews. Ways of looking at the world that encompass everything. I mean, you can divide the world up into many, many, many things, but we're going to call these worldviews, and we're going to call them 3. Now, one of my teachers has a PhD in comparative religion, and when he first heard this, he thought, yeah, right, okay. I have a PhD, I'll think of a 4th one. And then by the end of the class, he's like, well, I don't have time right now. I'll come up with one eventually. It's been, I don't know, 15 years or something like that, and he still hasn't come up with one. So we'll see how we do. So the first worldview is that things are random. Things happen for no reason. That's what random means. There's no reason behind it. It wasn't caused. It was just random. And if you have a partner, you can test this theory out very easily. And you will probably see very quickly that you're afraid to do it because you don't really believe it. This is a very easy one to prove. Wake up in the morning and look at your partner and go, you look like a piece of shit. And right away you think that's kind of funny, like, oh, I wouldn't do that. Why not? Because that would be rude and they would not be happy. Well, how do you know that? It's random. They might be like, oh, thank you. And say, let's go to the Bahamas. And you both go into the bathroom, close the door, and you're in Arizona. Because it's random, right? Nothing has a cause or relationship to what happens next. And you go, oh, so that's what random means? No, I don't believe that. That one's pretty easy to throw out. You go, yeah, I don't really believe that. Right. Now the next one is a little bit trickier. And you have to be careful, especially in this class when we talk about some of these things. Because remember, now this particular course, boiled down, we're going to wear 2 hats. One's called the Madhyamika hat, which is the highest school of teaching in Buddhism, as the Madhyamikas call it. And then there are people who go, well, that's just what they say, and but that's the one I belong to, so of course it's the highest one. It's the wisest one, has the deepest understanding of that thing we called emptiness earlier, the fact that things don't have a nature of their own. And there are other schools that have different understandings. And that's some of the biggest differences between what we'll call the schools of Buddhism, is how they describe or define or explain that concept of emptiness. Okay? Now, we didn't get into it at a really deep level with the pen and the chew toy, but that's important. That's actually not the highest level of understanding of it. It's a useful one. There's other ways we could say, well, this pen is one thing. It's a pen. Well, no, actually, it's multiple things. It's the plastic piece and the ink inside. It's 2 things. Well, actually, there's 2 parts to the cylinder, so it's 3 things, right? And so if I take the 3 parts and put them together, I get a pen, right? Show it to the dog. It still doesn't, so is it one thing or many things? If it was one thing, it would just be a pen. It would have no parts. So it has to be 3 things, the 2 parts of the barrel or case and the ink inside. But then you can go on down the line. Well, the barrel has the clip and the pushy thing, and it's like, and then you go on down the line, and that's another meditation you do for a while. You go in a retreat for 2 weeks, and you do that for 3 or 4 times a day for an hour, and after a while you go, okay, Uncle, I give up. I get it. It doesn't matter how far I go. It's not one or many from its own side. It's coming from me. I'm ascribing the fact that those parts make a pen. Because you put 4 people in a room, what do you get? I don't know. You get a party, you get people watching a football game, you get people in a Dharma class. It's not just the parts that it's like, well, wait a minute, then I have to, Because you could be sitting there going, well, this is just bullshit. This isn't spirituality. This is a waste of my time. You're ascribing that last piece to it. So yet another way of talking about emptiness. Okay? It's like, oh. So one of the things the Buddha does is he teaches hundreds, countless ways of understanding emptiness. And some of them are completely all you need to know, and others are just things that will get you closer to understand the next one, which is a little bit more complicated or head-scratching. And then from there you can go to the next step. So when he said one thing, we're asking the question, well, is that the truth? We grasp to the answer. Well, that's the truth. He said that. Well, he wasn't being literal because at the moment you're too stupid to understand it. So we're just trying to get you one step closer. It's kind of like when people give you directions. They go, well, you know, you go here and you go there and then there's a gas station. Ask them. Because by then you're going to have gotten lost anyway. So just, just get you closer. That's how I ask for directions sometimes. I just go, well, and then I hear okay, great. That's all I get. Don't tell me anymore. And then I get one step there because I'm like too stupid to remember all that stuff. And it's like, all right, I'll just get closer, So that's kind of what the Buddha and other spiritual teachers do. They get you closer step by step. It's another way of them teaching things. Okay, so we're going to be careful with this next one because we're wearing different hats. And at the moment, we're wearing the Buddhist hat, which doesn't believe in a creator God that exists in a particular way. Doesn't mean you can't believe in God. And it doesn't diss other religions. Those are useful. They can get you to your goal. But at the moment, we're wearing this hat and we're in this room, so we're going to follow this path, until the end of the class tonight. And then you can put on a different hat and say, okay, now how does that relate to what I've already learned? And do I like this one better, or is it more useful for me? Not, oh, finally, now I learned the truth and those people were idiots. But just go, well, this makes more sense to me. That's what happened for me. I was raised originally Christian in a Lutheran church and had some very great scriptural teachers. And never did it click. Never. It was very nice, but just there was something not there. And then I heard some series of teachings and bam, something changed. In Tibetan, there's a term, bakchak is a seed, a mental seed that you have. And they ripen constantly. But a bakchak sepa is like, bam, that's a big one, ripens in a really big way. And and that it's like, wow, it's like, this is what I got to do. It happens for you. So that's what happened for me. That made a lot of sense. It's like, oh, and like a duck to water, it seems, for me, from my side. Other people might go, I don't know, he just babbles on, I don't know. So for me, that made a lot of sense. And what's interesting is I learned more about Christianity since becoming a Buddhist and studying with Lama Marut than I had ever learned. Now, does that mean he taught me more things? Or I had a foundation, there were seeds planted, and then when he said it, I was like, oh, I see how that fits, and oh, there's some other pieces, and I got most of the puzzle together, and I'm like, oh, okay. So you start to see they're all very similar. It's like cereal, you get 5 kinds of frosty wheats, they're just all the same, just different boxes. So, okay. So take anything that we say in this class carefully. Like put your hat on, go, okay, which hat am I wearing? And notice that you'll have a thrown nature to think about things in a certain way. Oh my God, he said that, or oh no, this is wrong, or just go, well, okay, how could that be? Could I put the Buddhist hat on and try it on? And what would that be like? And then I'll take it off and I'll come back over here and go, oh, interesting, And you switch them back and forth. So it's an exercise in switching hats. Okay. So the next one is that, so we had random, which we're probably all comfortable saying that's not really a good worldview, is it? Okay. Now the next one is that there's a controlling entity. Okay. Now some people would say, there's a creator God that's managing everything, micromanaging, or you could say a puppeteer. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but there's a puppeteer that's controlling everything. And if you actually, now Lama Marut was a comparative religion scholar for 25 years. So when he says it, I get to repeat it and have some authority to it. It's not me saying it. It makes sense to me. So when he says there aren't any real serious theologians, thinking theologians that are going to go, yes, there's a creator God that's micromanaging everything. Because if that were the case, right now, it's not my fault that my arm came up. I had nothing to do with it. Somebody else did it. You know? And you got to think about that. You go, well, are they controlling everything? Like right now, I'm a little thirsty and I'm going to drink some tea. But I had nothing to do with it. It was God's will. God wanted me to drink the tea, so God raised the cup and God drank the tea. Like, what are the implications of that? And I throw God in there as one example, or it could be some other creator God, or, you could say in another system, there are the greater and lesser gods of destiny. And they get together and they roll the dice. So it's kind of random puppeteering or something. You mix and match these things is what we really do. But we'll get to that in a minute. So we don't really believe, like as a worldview, honestly, if you get right down to it, there are probably, not any really successful people. Successful meaning they can get through their day without being locked up or, can't survive, thinking that everything is controlled by the puppeteer. Okay? The man behind the curtain, however you want to think about it. And again, I'm not disrespecting, that's just for me. Like, I think of a puppeteer as controlling the puppets. The puppets don't walk around on their own. The puppeteer controls every movement. And they got all the little bars. So they do this and the hand moves. They do this and the mouth moves. It's like everything in that puppet show is controlled by the puppeteer. There's no puppet speaking. It's all the puppeteer. Okay? So with the greatest respect that I can have for that concept, that's one option. And you've got to ask yourself, do I really believe that? Now, when we say worldview, it means it encompasses everything. Now, what most of us do is, that asshole across the street just got a brand new Lexus. I don't know how that happened. He's just lucky that he got that promotion. And then the next day, you get called into the boss's office and they say, hey, we've been looking at the performance reviews. You've done a good job. You're going to get a raise and we're going to make you supervisor. And you're like, yes, of course. I put those causes into play. It's not random. It's not good luck on my part. I had something to do with it. And then you're on the plane to the convention that they're sending you to, and the pilot comes on and says, ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing technical difficulties. Please fasten your seatbelts and get into the crash position. And right away, we pull out the puppeteer. Dear puppeteer, please micromanage this moment and suspend the laws of cause and effect and do not let the plane crash. Or if it crashes, don't let it blow up. And if it doesn't blow up, don't let it sink and don't let me get hurt. Let me walk away. Because I know you can control everything and you're doing that, so I'm going to believe that for the moment. Then the plane lands safely and we're like, yeah, fine, whatever. Sunday I'm kind of busy and then I got to watch the football game. And you forget about the creator God you made the promise to that said, I will come to church every Sunday if you make me survive this. So we mix and match. Bad stuff happens. To me, it's just bad luck. Good stuff happens to the jerk. It's just random. And when necessary, we'll ask someone to be the puppeteer and micromanage. Or if we just can't figure it out. So that really doesn't sit well in totality. We don't want to take either one of those. So then you can say, well, what's left? And this is the third option, that there's a cause to everything. Everything has a cause. And so that's a little mantra that you can repeat throughout your day when stuff happens, good or bad. You go, wow, this too was caused. And just habituate yourself to that thought process and see if that helps you. Now, when bad crap happens, you go, this too was caused. Well, if there's a cause, what does that mean? If you don't put the cause into place, what happens? You don't get the result. Remember that TV show? What was it, Beretta or something? Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. That's one of the laws of cause and effect, that if you put the cause into place, the result will show up. Now, this is where we get into trouble with this one. We go, well, I believe that one, I'll try it on. And it turns out I was really struck by, I had one of those bok choy sebas that you talked about, and I thought about, spent all night contemplating how I'd been, cooking the books at work and stealing money. And I went into the boss and told him. And I wrote him a check. I said, I've been saving it away, and I got, $75,000 that I've skimmed off your books, and here's a check. And he fired me. Now, see, this cause and effect thing is bullshit. I don't believe it. I did something good, I told the truth, and a bad thing happened to me. Because one of the other laws that we're going to put up there is that an action is certain to produce a similar result. Telling the truth is a good thing, and I got a bad thing. I got fired. Now, the problem is that that doesn't match. The good thing, telling the truth, will result in something similar. In other words, someone's going to tell me the truth or not lie to me, or I'll understand something in a better way. Karma gets kind of deeply hidden, but on a simple level, in the springtime you plant pumpkin seeds. What do you get in the fall? Pumpkin. You don't get watermelons? You don't get tomatoes? It's like, duh, that's pretty simple. But just like the pumpkin seeds you planted on June 1st, what happened on June 2nd? No, apparently nothing. And what about June 3rd and June 10th? Well, I don't know, June 18th I see a little sprout. And then June 30th I've got vines. And, October 1st I've got pumpkins. It took time for that to grow. And that's one of the other laws, is it grows. It gets bigger. I put a seed in the ground. It's a pumpkin seed, not a watermelon seed. I got pumpkins. Big thing. Multiple pumpkins. So karma grows. So there's a cause and an effect. They don't happen at the same time. Because if they did, they wouldn't be cause and effect, would they? They'd be just thing. So a cause, and then there's a gap, and then there's an effect. But I put a cause into place, and then an effect happens, and I think, see, this package produced this result. No, this package down the road will produce that result. But I missed the gap. I didn't wait for it. So there's a really cool expression that comes from the, they call it the tube in London, because there's a gap between the train and the platform. Don't get your foot caught in there when you get out of the train. They say mind the gap. That applies to us in karma. Mind the gap. So you have to try those three on. And it's a really good experiment. You can wake up in the morning and try just for a half an hour to believe absolutely 100% that everything is random. I could open the refrigerator and tomorrow morning there will be creme brulee in there. I know that's not going to happen because I didn't put it in there today. But I'm going to try to believe that it's just random and it could be there. Or maybe it'll be like, you ever seen the movie Ghostbusters? You open the refrigerator and there's like some weird thing in there. Whoa, that was kind of random. That's not what usually comes out of a refrigerator. I don't really believe that. I can't hold that one. But try it. And then very quickly you go, it's just not useful either. Because what happens if everything is random? What do you not have? You have no control. No control. It's random. I can't do anything. It matters not what I do. Now, here's a question. What's the official scientific worldview of our culture? Everything's random. Now, cause and effect come into play for a portion of it because we can put a man on the moon. We know if we do this and we put this many volts on this transistor and we do this and we throw this much thrust rocket, we can get out of the Earth's atmosphere. But that all operates in a bigger scheme of, well, why do we have these things? Well, it's because this matter came from on back and back and back to the Big Bang. And then you ask the question, what happened? What caused the Big Bang? Nothing. It just happened. There was no cause. It was the only cause that had no cause. So what does that really mean? Now, there are changing views on that. So there again, science is a changing thing. It's not hard and fast. It's, you know, the science of the day is becoming that maybe there was a Big Bang before the Big Bang. There was a previous one. So now all of a sudden you're like, well, so everything wasn't caused by the Big Bang. Well, what caused that? Well, there was a previous Big Bang. And it's like, okay, you're getting closer and closer to Buddhism very, very quickly now. You know, since beginningless time, you know, is what we would say. So think about that. Our official, I mean, it's not like anybody decided and signed a proclamation, but it's the one we operate under is that things are random. And there's all kinds of theories about chaos theory, and then even that one you can chew apart and go, well, it's chaos, but it still has order to it. So they're not even saying that it's random. It just appears random, so it's not really a random theory. And you know, the Big Bang, which had no cause, actually was caused. And it's like, it gets really messy. So we could just stick to the everything has a cause and get there faster. And what happens if there's a cause? If you can understand what the cause is, you can either do more of it if you like it. You like pumpkins? Plant more pumpkin seeds. I hate watermelons. Don't put watermelon seeds in the ground. You know? There's somebody, I'm just guessing, just because this culture, we usually have people that have some kind of a Judeo-Christian background. So I'm guessing you probably have heard the Bible before, unless you're agnostics or atheists. Yeah, that's possible too. It doesn't really matter. But you've probably heard somewhere in the Bible, and I can't quote the exact ones, but somewhere Jesus said something along, there's two of them. You don't get figs from thistles, or you don't get grapes from thistles, or something. There's a couple like that. But basically he's saying the same thing. You don't get watermelons from pumpkin seeds. That's my glossing of it. Okay? And so that's right in the Bible. So if you want to be very spiritual and you don't want to be Buddhist, you can go, well, okay, Jesus taught karma. Same thing. Okay, and that's karma. That's the worldview of cause and effect. And then you go, oh, sounds simple, but remember we talked about the pen and the chew toy. In Tibetan, they say that concept is kokir. That means hidden. It's kind of complicated. I mean, at a level, we go, oh, pen and chew toy, I got it. But then you dig down into it when someone's yelling at you and understanding it, and then you want to get to the point where you experience that understanding directly. That's what we meditate on. That's what we're trying to get to. That was what was in that first paragraph that I read, that first verse, where he said, the Buddha said, different beings must wander here, that's meaning in samsara or suffering life, because they have no knowledge of the way of emptiness. They didn't know that it was not a pen from its own side. And so they stole the pen from the other guy because they didn't understand that. They said, well, it came from me. Where did I get the seed to see it as a pen? Someone said, oh my God, that girl that I saw, she's going to give me her phone number. She just called me. I got to write it down. You got a pen? And you're like, screw you. And then now you don't get a pen when you need one. Someone says, oh, you signed this contract right now. Call me back. It's like, oh crap, I can't remember that number. You know? So emptiness is hidden. Karma is deeply hidden. Again, cause and effect. Pumpkins, pumpkin seeds, pumpkins. Mind the gap, takes a while. It's very simple. But then it gets a lot more complicated when you really start to get into it. But at a basic level, it's pretty straightforward. You reap what you sow. Oh wait, who said that? We've all heard that one, right? Yeah. Okay. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Why? Because it's all going to come back to you. Huh. Why? Because it's not random and it's not out there coming at you. It's coming from you. Okay? All right. Any questions about any of that? It's a lot to think about. A lot of stuff. So we're giving you a really big foundation, or a lot of stuff thrown at you to give you some framework that we can use in the rest of the course. Because remember, the original teaching of this course, this was 10 classes, and it was after 14 other classes that had, or actually 11 classes each. So that's after a whole lot of study to get to this point when Geshe Michael said, okay, now you're ready for this. But that's not to say you shouldn't be here, because there's also the idea that You walk into, I jumped in my first yoga class, not first yoga class, but first serious study one. I went to Mexico with Geshe Michael and another incredible yoga teacher, and I went to series 7 of a particular set of series, which I eventually then learned 1 through 6. But I jumped in at 7. I was like, and it was harder. That was a progressive one. I was like, jumped in, and I just kept falling over, going, I don't get most of this, but I'll just take what I get. Little by little, just enjoy it and say, well, okay, I'll just have fun. And that's a good practice. Just have fun and enjoy it and say, oh, see what I can get out of it. See if I can get one nugget that can be useful. Pen and cheat toy. That jerk at the office is, well, his wife or her husband loves them, or they got kids that think they're awesome or something. Their boss thinks they do a good job. Somebody, and you go, yeah, but they just don't know the real person. So we see how we want to convince ourselves and others that we're right, but it's coming from us. That's a lot of responsibility. Say, I don't want to, when something happens, you go, well, this too was caused by me. That's the more advanced version of it, by me. And then you go, well, that's a heavy thing to carry. But on the other hand, if you flip it around and go, that's pretty empowering. Anytime you get something that's really powerful, it can also be very dangerous, or it can be a lot of work. So that's part of it, is that's going to give you complete control over your life. But not in the moment, because in the fall, when the pumpkins are coming up, can I push them back in the ground and go, I don't want pumpkins. It's too late. I've already planted the seed. But I'm going to be a smart farmer, and I'm going to get what? And put them in the ground if I don't want pumpkins and I want tomatoes. I'll get tomato seeds. I'll get what I want if I plant for the future. So then you start saying, oh, I see what this is about. It's about understanding how things work, planting for the future, because I got to mind the gap. Stop producing bad seeds. Don't put them in the ground. And then eventually bad things won't happen. What's that?
That's simply put.
Yeah, yeah. And so you garden for the future. And then you go, oh, it's that simple. Yeah, but it's also very deeply hidden, and there's a lot more complicated things. And then you can learn special ways to make it work faster, make the karmic seeds more powerful. And then you can get really deep teachings, and then you can let it on fire with jet fuel and learn the secret teachings that they have. And it's really, it's like the kind of things that you learn that you just hurt yourself because you wouldn't understand it. You go, oh, that's just crap. That's not possible. I mean, we have hard enough time just understanding karma and past and future lives. The guy in this is called a Tunka. The guy in this Tunka is Jason Kappa, the one in the middle. The other two are his disciples. Two of his disciples. He's the person that taught the first Dalai Lama. And he's the person whose texts we're going to be reading in this class. He wrote a commentary on stuff the Buddha said. And he's telling us how we figure out what the Buddha meant when he said this stuff. Did he mean it literally? Are there really seeds inside me? Well, no, that's not literally a seed, but it works as a metaphor. Oh, okay. When the Buddha said, kill your mother and father, was he being literal? And there's tests. I'll test it like gold. Does it match? Does it match the other teachings that he's given? Does it match other things I've seen? Well, that doesn't really work out well for people when that happens. Okay, so that doesn't kind of make sense. Maybe he meant something else. It's also another reason that you want to find somebody to teach you this stuff instead of just, Googling it on YouTube or something. Because you won't get all the pieces and you won't have any feedback, and then you just get yourself in trouble. And you go, oh, well, I heard that, so I used it. Well, that's not what he meant, I know somebody who was building a cabin to do a retreat. There's a place in Arizona where there's 40 people doing a 3-year retreat. And he was building his cabin, and he Googled on the internet all the things to do, how to build a cabin. Well, he learned how to build the bathroom, and then he had a bunch of extra cement. He poured it down the drain. Yeah. See? Google's great, YouTube's great, I learned how to do this, but he was still missing one little piece. And then the building inspector came and said, oh yeah, nice job on the sheetrock, but you got to cut a hole all the way around so I can look at the wiring, because I have to inspect it. Either that or just take all the sheetrock off. So he cut a hole in all the room. So the inspector could see the wiring because he didn't know he had to wait and go step by step. Then you do the wiring, then you get signed off, then you put up the walls. So again, not having a teacher can be a problem in and of itself. Okay? So you want to find a place that is teaching the things that can help you in a way that's helpful. And not saying you have to do this is the right and only way. In flat-footed ways that just don't make a lot of sense. And one of the things that we do here on Saturday mornings, we do something called debate. Debate is something that the Buddha encouraged. You come to a class like this and you go, wow, that's complicated, my head's spinning, I went home and I thought about it, and then I had a question. So you bring it to the debate ground. We sit around and drink coffee and eat pastries and stuff and chat about it. But we chat about it in a way that we're not just like yammering. There's some format to it that you learn over time. And it helps you dig down and find the assumptions that you have in the back of your mind you didn't know were there. And once you uncover those, you go, oh, that's why I think that's bad, and that's why that happens. And oh, I didn't understand. Oh, yeah, I remember now. Okay, that makes sense. Then you learn from that. You pull it apart. That's what the Buddha said. Test it like gold. So that's like the proving ground, the testing ground. And we can do that in class too. That's why I periodically say, anybody have any questions? Those are the kind of things where we're okay. Let's think about it. But sometimes you just need to cook it. You just gotta go, wow, that's a lot of stuff. My head's spinning. And that's normal. But they say that the ignorance that's causing us suffering, if you think about the pen and the chew toy thing, even just kind of go like, yeah, I don't know, maybe there's like some grain of truth to it. There's something there. That level of understanding, even just that subtle level, is enough to put a permanent tear in your ignorance, in the fabric of your ignorance. Lama Maru calls it like getting a little tear on a sweater that eventually is just going to like wear away. It just takes a little bit to get started. And why is that? Because in Buddhism, there's something called Buddha nature, which is, remember we said pen and chew toy? This stick is empty of being a pen, or a chew toy, or a knife, or an ice pick, or whatever, or a kayak deck toggle, or any number of things. Just as that's true, the same is true for us. We are empty of being suffering jerks. Well, I am suffering. Yeah, you are now, but it's not hardwired forever. You're changing, and you can change. Really? How do I do that? Learn about cause and effect, karma, wisdom, how things work. Put it into practice, and then your life changes. And a year later, you're just a lot happier going, oh yeah, I remember it, life used to really be crappy, and now it's not so crappy. And I have some tools that can make it even better. And you work with them little by little by little. So that's a path. That's a spiritual practice. It's something that you put into practice. So one of the things that is advised in the Buddhist idea of teaching is that as soon as you hear something like this, you start to put it into practice. Not like, oh yeah, maybe I'll try that next week. Not even wait until tomorrow morning. Actually, you start doing it while you're in class. Start thinking about it, going, oh yeah, how does that affect me? How does that apply to me? But what usually happens is we go, oh, I know how that applies to him. He should be doing blah, blah, blah. We apply it to other people instead of ourselves because it's just a lot easier. But thinking about it and saying, is it true that there's only 3 worldviews? Not just believing it because I said so, but wrestling with it. It's like, well, maybe there is a 4th. What would it be? And then you're looking for something that's not there because there isn't one, but that's just what I say. But you try it. And then after a while you go, okay, I'm going to agree for now anyway that there's only 3 until I find a 4th one. And then eventually you go, I couldn't find one, so I gave up. Or maybe you will find one, I don't know. And then you try on the cause and effect idea for a while. And you go, okay, everything has a cause. I tried that on. I got tripped up by that gap thing very often. I did the right thing and I got screwed. But then I thought, oh yeah, I planted pumpkin seeds and I got watermelons. That's not possible. You don't get grapes from thistles. So there must have been more, watermelon seeds in the ground. and the pumpkin seeds I got I didn't plant right, and or maybe they'll come up later. And he's like, I'll stick with it for a while. You got to try it on. You got to have a little bit of a leap of faith to try it, and give it a little while. And there's techniques to make it work really well, and we can tell you about some of those. And one of the most important ones is overcoming there's a cool Tibetan word called lay low. Say that, say lay low. Yeah, it means laziness. And it's an easy one for people to remember because it kind of sounds like, oh, I got lay low. Now, it's not laziness like I'm a beer-guzzling slob kind of lazy. It's I just don't feel like it. I don't have the spark, the motivation. It's like, yeah, that was good. I went last Tuesday. It was kind of interesting, but yeah, I don't know if I want to go this week. And yeah, well, maybe there's some other teachers. There's a really cool teacher on Tuesday evenings. I could go to that class, but that's a 10 class course, and I already missed one, and I'll probably go the next time around. Well, we'll see who's oh, that woman Lindsay, the actress, she's teaching. Maybe I'll go to that one. I hope. Well, I can't go to the first one because I already got something planned, but I'll try to catch 3 of them. It's just that I just don't. And then there are other people like lit on fire. They're done with the retreat going, can you get on Skype and teach me on Sunday? I want to know more about this. I want to do this book thing. I don't understand it. Teach me meditation once a week. Can you come up here once a week? I'll give you a place to stay. We'll come up on Sunday. You can stay until I go, where? It's like, well, I'm on fire. I want to start a Sangha. How do I get a group going here? How do I get teachers coming? There's extremes, and I just don't feel like it is not a good one. So you got to figure out, is there anything that could light the spark? And what brings most people to practice is a really big disaster where they just go, I just can't take this. There's got to be a better way. Or a series of little ones. Not very often are people going, well, I'm driving my Lexus to my mansion, and I got plenty of food, and my servants cook me good meals, and life is good. I got nothing to worry about. It's like the guy who has a hole in his roof in the pouring rainstorm. He's like, oh my God, it's like 50-mile-an-hour winds. I can't go fix the roof. I'll do it tomorrow when the storm stops. And tomorrow comes and it's like 80 degrees. It's like, I'm going to the beach. I'll fix the roof later. It's either too hard because you're in the midst of a disaster, or life's too good and you just don't feel like it. Those are very common things. Or, what did I say was one of the top 6 mental afflictions is doubt. I doubt it would work. I doubt it would work for me. Something along those lines. And see if any of those things crop up for you and watch for them. So in Tibetan, or just Buddhism in general, we have these tanka things. These ones are really like peaceful, cool ones. But there are tankas that have these like really gnarly, Lama Rinpoche calls them like Mr. T, like protector beings. Like, they got weapons and chainmails and swords, and they've got necklaces of skulls. Or actually, one of them, I don't know. Yeah, these ones are really tame ones. These are all like warm, fuzzy, compassionate ones. But some of them are like, necklaces made out of skulls. Like, where'd they get the skulls? They chop people, and they're still drinking out of the cup of blood from the head they just chopped off. It's like, how's that peaceful? I thought Buddhists are supposed to be nice. Well, that's what you're supposed to do to the things that get in your way. The things that really get in your way are your mental afflictions. I couldn't do it. I don't think that's useful. Those kinds of things. Wanting to watch Seinfeld reruns instead of come to class. Desiring the wrong thing, thinking that will get you happy instead of some wisdom. Those are the things that you chop their heads off. Those are the demons. And where do those demons live? They don't crawl out from under a rock. They come from you just like everything else. And they're your habits. That's another way of saying karma. They're the things that you're used to doing. Because one of the things about karma is that you're going to do the same thing over and over again. You habituate yourself to it. You become habituated to it. So just like the habit of smoking or drug dealing, drug using, we're junkies for the things we think are going to make us happy. And we don't recognize that they're, well, yeah, but the next morning I feel like crap, but that's just because I feel like crap and it's random, but I'm going after that fix, you know. And we're like junkies with, well, that guy's a jerk, and talking about people and idols, all the things that we do out of habit. And we've been doing it without knowing that it was hurting us. So in Buddhism, there's a metaphor of dropping the coal that's in your hand burning you. And so what happens is, and I brought these for something else, but you're probably wondering why there are rocks here. We didn't get to that part yet. So let's pretend this is a hot coal. And you come along and you go, oh, I hurt. I'm burning. And you ask a spiritual teacher, what should I do? And they say, drop the coal. And it's not that I think, this is my interpretation, it's not that I don't want to let go of the coal because I'm like, well, I know it burns, but I want to hold on to it. It's I don't make the connection. My teacher says let go of the coal, and I think, well, that's stupid. Why would I let go of the coal? This is mine. I want it. I worked hard to get it, and it's not what's causing my pain. I don't make that connection, and I don't trust my teacher, and I don't do what they tell me. So they say let go of the coal, and I go, well, no. I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to kind of well, when you tell me good stuff that I like, I'll follow those things. But when you tell me stupid stuff like let go of the coal that's mine and I've worked really hard to get it, I'm not going to follow your instructions. So I'm going to pick and choose what I do because I know more than you, which is pride, which is another one of the big mental afflictions that we have. Or turn it another way, I doubt that you know what you're talking about because you don't know as much as me. And I don't make the connection that this is what's burning my hand. And when I go, oh, this is burning my hand. Your instructions are to let go. Yes, I will. Now I see how it works. So you just got to try it. And that's one of the tricks of getting on a spiritual path. But it's not like a slot race car where you just get on and then it's smooth sailing. You know, you're going to wind around and you'll be on and off the path. And Jason Kappa said, that's how you know you're following a path, is when you stumble off of it. That means you were on one. So that's a good thing. That's more than most people. Okay. So try out the worldviews. And if you found something useful this week, you know, come back next week and, you know, report about it. Think about it. You know, try it throughout your day and just kind of notice the thought processes that are in your mind when something happens. Oh, what a jerk. You know? He's so lucky. And ask yourself, does it fit with the worldview that was caused? And you'll notice, yeah, I didn't actually think there was a cause for that. You know, and it begins to open up some space in your mind to look for something that can help you. Because if everything is caused, then all you have to learn to do is stop putting the causes for bad things in place, start putting the causes for good things, and life will get better in the future. You're farming for your future. That's right out of the Yoga Sutra. We must be like farmers. That's what that verse means. You know? But you can see how that verse wouldn't mean anything if you didn't have anybody explain it to you. You must be like farmers. What does that mean? I got to go buy a farm? Or Jesus, you reap what you sow. How many people, well, I don't reap anything and I don't sow anything. I just go to the grocery store. You know, we live in a different culture, so we have to have somebody explain it to us. You know, okay, that makes sense. And then you try it. So, let's see if there's anything else we want to do. Yeah, I think that's it for today. So hopefully something was useful. And you're welcome to come back or not. Skip a week, skip two, skip them all, don't skip any, whatever you like. We have other stuff. Make sure you're on the email list. Do you have email? No, okay. Well, just check in with the schedule and see what we got, and you walk by, and you know, it's a habit in Buddhism to take a second at the end of the class to think about what we've done. And remember, Buddhists think that things are caused and there's karma, and something that produces a result you like is good karma. Something that produces a result that you don't like would be bad karma. So if you don't like watermelons, planting watermelon seeds is planting bad karma. Okay? If you like pumpkins, and there's this awesome dish you like to make, that you got from this Afghan restaurant. It's like, oh, I gotta have pumpkins. Then you plant pumpkin seeds. So if this stuff is useful and you are thinking about it and struggling with it, then you're planting good karmic seeds. And so we do something called dedication. You think that, okay, I got some good seeds. There's one way to think about it. And, well, if the seed thing is true, the best way to get something would be to give it away. So you kind of envision yourself collecting some good seeds, and then you think about it. You can close your eyes, and you can just imagine like a white light coming out of your heart as the good seeds that you're giving to everybody that you know who's having trouble. And you say, well, I don't know, maybe this stuff could be useful. If it is, then I collected some good karma, and, that person at work or the person that I see that's having trouble, I'm going to give them that good karma. And hopefully it will help them feel a little better. Then we won't go down in the rabbit hole. Does that really work? And how does it work? And all that kind of stuff. You just see yourself like you're a superhero. It's like, oh, I have this cool stuff, and I just give it away. And that will plant other seeds for you, that you're generous and helpful. And if those seeds ripen, how would that come? And you go, oh, you see how that could work. And you could get on an upward spiral of things being better rather than a downward spiral of things getting worse. And that's what's on the table. That's what's offered here in all the different kinds of courses. They're all different pieces of the puzzle, even the yoga classes, and the debate, and the logic classes, and the wisdom classes, and the compassion classes, and the meditation classes, because it's in meditation that you get this information and you wrestle with it. And you go, wait a minute, now pen and shoot, let me think about that. You spend 5 minutes just kind of, quietly thinking about it. And then you come to an understanding and you go, I get that. And then you just burn it in a little bit more. And then you get more teachings about the pen and the chew toy and the angry boss. And then one day someone yells at you or does something really nasty. I'll put that in quotes. And so everybody else around is going, oh my God, why are you like so pissed? And you're like, what? Oh yeah, not a big deal. Didn't bother me. It wasn't a chew toy anymore, it was a pen. Same concept. Change you and you change your world. So I would look silly up here if there was nobody in the room. So you made it possible. So that's another Buddhist concept called interdependence. So I can't teach if there's nobody to be the student to listen. So you helped me. You helped me understand it more. And so thank you. And I hope something was useful. And if not, well, sorry. I don't know. The Dalai Lama has some good line, but I only know the first part. I hope it was useful. And I don't know what the rest of it is. I forget. So, yeah. All right. Let me turn this off.
One question.
Sure.
The first time that I attended one of these workshops was in July.